Okay. So today's lecture is called What the Buddha Taught, what the Buddha actually taught. And when he was asked, he said, I teach only dukkha and the elimination of dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. It's an old Pali word. That was not the language of the day. That was kind of a formal language. It was nobody's vernacular. It was translated by early Christian scholars and translated as suffering. I don't think suffering is exactly right as you read more about it. It's the sense of dukkha is closer to dis-ease or unease or anxiety. Dukkha is not getting what we want. Dukkha is getting what we don't want. Dukkha is trying to hold on to something we like and stop it from changing. Wanting people not to be part of our life, wanting to avoid sickness, old age, and death, and trying to control our experiences so that only pleasant things stay with us and not so pleasant things go away. That's dukkha. There's nothing the Buddha taught that will save us from an earthquake or save us from feeling pain if we cut ourselves or if we're damaged or if we're wounded. But the dukkha itself is a mental experience. It's not the actual act of being sick. Being sick is very clear. Dying is very clear. Actual suffering is very clear. So I'm going to talk about the Four Noble Truths. This was the first thing that Buddha said when he had his enlightenment. And he didn't want to teach. It took him 49 days to decide to teach because he was afraid that things were too subtle, too difficult for everyday people to understand. And the thing that moves me about him is that he had enough compassion to try. When my teacher told me that he wanted to teach, he wanted me to teach, I said, oh God, no, I'm not ready. No. And he just stopped my little rambling and said, look, there are people ahead of you that you'll learn from. There are people behind you that you'll help. So maybe the Buddha decided something like that. I can help some people. So the first noble truth was the truth that suffering exists. And maybe this sounds like, the commonplace or everybody knows this. But certainly today, there's often a kind of understanding that if you're suffering, somehow it's your fault. If you hadn't eaten gluten, if you'd just eaten more garlic, if you had just done yoga. And there's this feeling that maybe suffering is neurotic or is extra. And the truth of it is that it's part of the human genome. It's part of our, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years of being born and living. And what the dukkha part of it is are the mental formations, the shoulds and shouldn'ts, judgment, anxiety, anger and jealousy and arrogance. They're called poisons because they not only poison us, but they poison our relationships with other people. They're very powerful. They're very hypnotic. And on some level, I'm not sure we ever get rid of them. Even after we're enlightened, we have this karma. I certainly have these things. I mean, believe me, I still struggle with my temper. I still struggle with criticizing people for being stupid. In my family, it was better to be a thief than to be stupid. So I have strange ideas that I've struggled with around that subject. It happens a lot. But all those struggles and all those things, that's dukkha. It's the mental formation. You get sick and you say, oh my God, I'm sick. I have to do such and such today. Oh my God, I'm going to be out for a week. The boss will be angry. This is going to be terrible. That's dukkha. Being sick is very clear. Your sinuses are stuffed. You have a fever. You have a headache. There are things to do. Dukkha is attachment to the mental formations and our thoughts. That's what we can do something about. These thoughts are actually acts of the mind, and they lead to acts of body and speech. And one of the reasons they're important is because if we believe everything we think, and most people do, I have a tendency to do that, but after enough practice, you stop and you say, wait a minute, let's check this out. Is this true? I thought it. I know I'm the smartest man in the world. I thought it. It must be true, but it might not be true. And these acts of mind go right past our teeth. Somebody says something before we've thought. We've said, that's really stupid. Or done something to hurt someone, or done something physical. I gave the example, I think last week, of a driver cuts you off and you flip him the finger. Boy, that impulse is just like pulling a trigger. So one of the things we pay a great deal of attention to, and one of the reasons that we meditate, is to understand that these acts of mind are not substantial. They're empty. The brain is a gland for producing images and thoughts. That's not the problem. Stopping the mind does not mean stopping the activities of mind. It means engaging the mind with the entire body so that your breathing is mind, your mudra is the mind, your posture is the mind. And when you do that, you're not attached to your thoughts. You're not hooked by them like a conveyor belt, that jerks us along. So the second noble truth is the cause of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering. And in a single word, it's grasping. It's attaching to things we like and fleeing from things we don't. America's a very emotional country. We're proud of our deep feelings and our passions. And I'm watching people out in the street right now protesting against all scientific, fact-based advice about this virus. And they're saying, give me liberty or give me death. I saw a sign on the TV that said that this morning. And I'm not so perfectly evolved that I can't agree, okay, you can die, but I'm not willing to go so far as to say you're going to take a lot of people with you, and that's also okay. So these emotions, we identify with these emotions, and we believe them actually a lot more than they do in other countries. Not every country is the same. Not every culture is the same. The Tibetans say anger is present. We say I'm angry. That I means my identity is angry. It's in a state where it is totally involved with this emotion that I'm attached to. That's heavy duty. Tibetans say anger is present. There's no I there. Anger is there. It's in the environment, something to be dealt with. Well, what are we going to do? In Spanish, you say, tengo ira or tengo cabrejo. I have anger. I have irritation. It's a quality. It's not the absolute. So we can see that for all its gifts, language also takes a tax on us. Because when we name things, we tend to believe that they're real, that they're absolute, and they're graspable. We certainly do believe our I is that way. Most people do. So there's a term for this, and the term for this self-focused desire, self-focused, longing, greed, anger, jealousy. The ancient word for that was tanha, T-A-N-H-A. So this was recognized thousands of years ago. They've just discovered that the Buddha lived 600 years earlier than they thought he did. So archaeologists knew that Buddha was born about 2,500 years ago. They've just pushed that back another 600 years. 600 years before the birth of Christ. Okay, so our let's take anger, for instance. Our anger is one part of it. So we're angry. My I is angry. I'm angry. But at the same time, my worldview is such that I'm completely ignorant at that moment of my connections to the rest of the world. I mean, my self-obsession is in itself ignorance of interdependence. I'm sure, I mean, this is not rocket science, but Buddha called interdependence dependent origination, which means that for something to exist, something else has to exist. You can't have an apple without an apple tree. You can't have an apple tree without soil, sunshine, water, pollinating insects, microbes in the soil. You can't have a self without a body, thoughts, impulses, sensations, consciousness. You can't have those things without sunlight, water, microbes in the soil, people growing and milling cotton and making your clothes. So there's another equally true way of looking at the world. We all have self-awareness. We all feel like we're a separate, discrete entity. That's one way of looking at it. In the same way that we say body and mind are not one, not two, can't really separate them. They're not the same, but they're not different. Well, in the same way, dependent origination and self-centered or self-consciousness are not one, not two. The problem is we don't often pay attention to dependent origination. So one problem is that we don't ask ourselves, why am I so willing to believe everything that comes over the spinal telephone? Who am I? I mean, it might be right. Most of us are pretty perceptive. I'm right some of the time. The problem is when I'm not right. If I don't have a place to go, or a teacher, or a favorite uncle, or a critic who'll tell me the truth, every one of us can make mistakes. Believe me, I wrote 2 books about my mistakes. So it's not the suffering that comes and goes. When we meditate, emotions will rise, and if our posture is strong and if we're good and clear, we'll stay with them a while, we'll acknowledge them, we'll recognize them, and then they'll disappear. They'll go away. It's not that. It's that when we resist suffering, we make it stronger. We go to the gym. We work out with weights. We resist muscles, they get stronger. There's nothing we can feel that's crazy. But feeling something and not wanting to feel it, that's crazy. That's what destabilizes us. That's what locks us into mental realms. So here's an example. I was born in Englewood, New Jersey in 1941. And that year, Charles Lindbergh, a great aviator hero who ran for president, had a child kidnapped in Englewood, New Jersey, and was killed. And my mom told me that when I was born in October 1941, when I was born for a year, my father walked the halls at night. He didn't sleep with a pistol because he was so anxious about somebody trying to come in and steal his son. Now, my father's father tried to kill him when he was about 6 years old, a misunderstanding, tried to shove him out a little round window in the 3rd floor of his house. So there was a lot of rage and a lot of fear in my house growing up. And when I was growing up and I saw my dad was a sparring partner of Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. He was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, went to MIT when he was 15. Very smart, very powerful, actually quite dangerous. When I saw him scared, that made me scared. And I can remember thinking, oh my God, there's stuff out there that my dad is scared of. My dad is scared. Well, that must mean because he's uncertain as to whether or not he can beat it. Well, if he can't beat it, what will happen to me? Oh my God. That, that's dukkha. And I won't even tell you the 30 or 40 years of working with anger and rage that were required for, just me to be a normal human being or not try to take all the heroin that was in San Francisco. So these are human events. It's one thing if the thought comes through us and we let it go and we acknowledge it. Wow, I'm really anxious. I'm really anxious. Sometimes my heart skips beats. And it used to be that it would skip once, and being a Jewish hypochondriac, I'd go, that's it. Look for a place to lay down so they don't find me, in the wrong place. Now I can just look at it. I say, oh, I'm anxious. Okay. And you just accept it. You don't run from it. It's not going to kill you. It's not, I promise. I want to check the time. Okay. I may have to do this lecture in 2 parts today. Because I don't want to strain people's attention span much more than about 20 or 25 minutes. So, first noble truth is suffering exists. Second noble truth is the truth of the cause of suffering. The third noble truth is the truth of the end of suffering. So, the end of suffering, just as the truth of suffering was grasping, the end of suffering is letting go. Just that. Dukkha doesn't necessarily arise at every misfortune or pain. It arises when we try to control the experience, when we try to minimize it, when we try to control nature, when we try to control what's happening, when we don't accept what's really happening right in front of us, right in this moment. We don't like it. Well, who's that we? Who's that I that wants to control things? The problem is because it has a name, we think of it as something with fixed qualities. Maybe a little walnut with your name tucked under your liver, or maybe a little homunculus, a little miniature you inside your brain that's doing your thinking and hearing and seeing and talking. But the truth, the implication of dependent origination is that all forms are finally empty because all forms are made out of other forms. Myself is made out of all non-self elements: body, form, feeling, thought, impulse, sensation, sunlight, water, blah, blah, blah. So nobody denies that the self is an awareness. But the good news is it's not fixed. It's not stamped with qualities. And those qualities that we think of as me, I'm always this way, I always do this. Good news is they're just habits. They're just habits. They may be deep. They may be penetrating. We say Buddha is still working on himself somewhere, but you can break them. And the surest technology on earth for breaking them permanently is meditation. It's an astoundingly simple technology that will teach you to let go of dukkha and just regard it as one among numerous phenomenon. Yeah, if we understand that our suffering is natural, it's a part of all human experience. It's natural. It doesn't make us neurotic. There's nothing wrong with us. We don't have to control it. We don't have to push it away. We can actually develop the strength and the patience and the fortitude and the courage to face it. We can do that. Men can do it. Women can do it. A tailor can do it at his workbench. The great democratization that Buddha made growing up out of a Hindu culture which was full of castes and untouchables, and women were third-class citizens. And Buddha just threw all that aside. He admitted men and women, different religions, different castes, because he knew the problem was in none of those externals. And what he taught was a fundamental liberation. And so if you realize that your suffering is not a condemnation of this thing you imagine in there, this self in there, you can just sit with it. You can just breathe in it a little while. It's okay. So I'm going to do the last truth, and then I'm going to do the second half next week, I think, because I think it'll be too long. It's been almost a half hour. So the final truth is that there's a path that leads to the end of suffering. So suffering exists. It's not neurotic. It doesn't make you wrong, sick, ill, twisted. There's a cause to suffering. There is a truth that suffering can end. And finally, there's a way to do it. There's a path that leads. Now, there's a great, very famous Zen master named Hakuin. He was a Rinzai Zen teacher. My school of Zen practice is Soto. It's kind of softer. It's a little less aristocrazone. But the Rinzai people were training. They were the children of royalty in Japan. And they were training the upper classes, training their kids to be samurai, to be warriors, very like the Marines of Zen, very disciplined. The Soto feeling is more like if you walk in fog long enough, one day you'll be drenched, and the fog is wisdom. And why did I say that? That's so funny. The truth of, oh yes. So Hakuin, this very famous Zen master, 45 years of meditating, and Uncle Dribble can just lose it in an instant. Hakuin, one of the most famous Rinzai masters. He was a cartoonist. He wrote songs. He did books. He had many Kensho and enlightenment experiences. But his final enlightenment, the one that he discerned was the most important, was actually following the Buddha's Eightfold Path. It's actually kind of a circle. And I have a couple more minutes, and I'll start talking about it, and then I'll pick it up next week. So you think of the past is, so Buddhists love these numbered lists, right? Most of the people were illiterate. And these numbers, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, they actually help you identify and remember things. I think that's one reason why they're done that way. So the first thing that we do is we train ourselves to identify these tanhas, these mental events, disappointment, craving, anxiety. Just identify them as they rise. There's a huge difference between saying, oh, if that SOB ever says that to me again, I will slap him into next Tuesday. And, wow, I'm really angry. Where is that in my body? What's bothering me about that? What part of what just happened really triggered me? That puts you in the driver's seat. That gives you the discretion and the detachment to be able to tolerate anything your mind puts up. So the very first thing we have to do is we have to identify these mental events. And then, even if it takes baby steps, we have to begin practicing learning how to tolerate them. Meditation helps us develop strength and allows us to become aware of these feelings and to realize that they are insubstantial. They may generate powerful emotions, but there's no there there. You can't grasp them. And just like cloud formations, camels turning into Eskimos, turning into Zulu warriors, they're going to change. You can't hold on to a good mood, and you won't be able to hold on to a bad mood unless you fight it. If you just sit and allow your emotional weather to come through, and you have this posture and this attention on your breath and this mudra, you'll make it. I promise. You will make it. So the Eightfold Path is normally described by using the word right understanding, right thought, right perspective, right effort. In English, that tends to connote right and wrong. And although that's not the sense of it that Buddha meant was right in terms of being aligned with his thinking. So my teacher always uses the word Buddha instead of right, Buddhist thought, which implies there are other ways to do this. This is just the way we do it. And if you find it valuable, you'll do it too. So the first step on the path is called Buddhist understanding. And this means to see the transitory, ephemeral nature of all things. Bingo. I have these little skulls on my, I don't know if you can see it, on my malas to remind me of impermanence. If you think about it, no one has any strong feelings about artificial flowers. They're not dying. So the limits on their life doesn't make them precious. The thing that makes flowers precious is they're just here for a short time. And that's true of everything. And if you hold on to that, it makes all people just as equal as the virus makes them. We're just here for a short time. We're unrepeatable experiences. And the person that you hate today is going to be gone tomorrow. And the person that you love today is going to be gone tomorrow. I just lost my oldest friend day before yesterday, on the 16th. From 5, 6 years old, we were inseparable. It happens. That's the understanding, right understanding. So Buddha never said that the self existed or didn't exist. He was not going to get caught in that trap. He did say it wasn't fixed. It's not a fixed thing. And yet all of our experience and all of our assumptions have led us to act as if it's fixed. And one of the things that sinking into the formless with meditation does is allow us to realize what formlessness is and feels like, and to allow that fixed identity to disappear a little bit. So this self-awareness, as I said before, is only one point of view. The other point of view that's equally true, it is true that we have self-awareness as it is that everything is part of one great big thing. If the earth was closer to the sun, there'd be no water. We wouldn't be here. If it was farther away, all the water would be ice. If there was no sunlight, we wouldn't be here. If there was no water, if there were no microbes in the soil growing our food, if there were no pollinating insects, no birds to control the pests. That's dependent origination. And that's as true for our identity and our bodies as it is for anything else. So our small mind, that mind of my self-awareness, that's the one that says, oh, I want the world to be this way. I want people to be this way. I want my wife to be this way. I want my husband to be this way. That's small mind. In big mind, formlessness, what Buddhists call emptiness, all those distinctions disappear. And they call them empty because they are without a fixed self. If I take my hand apart and I take off the skin and the nerves and the blood vessels and the muscles and the ligaments and the lymph, there's not going to find anything in there that is hand. Hand is a convenience. And it's really a convenient. It's really a convenience. But it's become so convenient that we tend to identify things we can name with actual graspable objects. Certainly not true of ourself. You don't know what color it is, what form it is, where it's located. So, I actually talked about this. So this is right understanding. This is the first step on the path. And because there are 7 more steps to go to, I think I'll continue this next week as part 2.